A while back, someone dropped a comment on one of my videos that I should not be referencing Carl Jung in the 21st century because his work is somehow outdated. And my response to that is, well, this video and the question, did the human psyche get a software update that I didn't notice that made everything that became before suddenly obsolete? In this video, I'm going to show you why Carl Jung is more relevant today than ever. I'll show you the core Jungian idea that explains why we're so polarized, so split, so busy projecting our problems onto each other. And I'll show you where our current thinking is most faulty. Here's a hint. It's in our obsession with linear thinking, cause and effect, instead of seeing the bigger picture. I'm Neil Beerbaum, Master Certified Coach, and I've spent 4 decades as an adult testing what works for personal development. In this video, I'm going to show you why one of the most dismissed thinkers in psychology holds the key to understanding yourself and the mess we're in today. And you know what I mean, that feeling that everyone is at each other's throats, left versus right, rich versus poor, men versus women. And nobody seems to have a framework for why, let alone what's to do about it. I've been a coach for 20-odd years and I've watched hundreds of clients struggle with exactly the split that Jung diagnosed a century ago. So I'm going to show you what that split is, how it works, and what you and we can do about it. So who was Jung and what did he actually say? Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who broke with Freud in the early 20th century. Freud saw the unconscious as a dumping ground for repressed desires, especially sexual desires. Jung saw something much bigger. He viewed the psyche as a healthy, self-governing whole that was determined to grow no matter what, the way a tree grows, because each tree finds its own unique path to the light. It will not be stopped, not even by concrete. I'm sure you've seen how trees grow through paving and crack walls. Jung said that our psyche is like that tree. It just keeps growing, and if you chop off a branch here, it will grow another one there. In other words, if you deny a part of yourself here, it will come out in another way over there. I'll explain more in a minute. Because this is where Jung contradicts the other dominant philosophies of his time and of today. The dominant psychology of his time was behaviorism. You had Pavlov and his dogs. Pavlov rang a bell at dinner time and the dogs salivated. Then he just rang the bell without serving dinner and the dogs still salivated. Humans do that today. You say Trump, even when he's not there, and people salivate. Joking, but you get the point. And then you had Skinner, who did experiments with rats, getting them to tap a lever for food, and proving that you could change behaviors, the output, by changing the input, when and how the tapping was linked to food. Skinner decided that this could work for people too, and he wrote a book called Walden 2, in which he proposed that you could create a perfect society by applying his method, which he called operant conditioning, to human beings. Input produces output, stimulus produces response. Everything is caused, and if we can control the cause, we can control the result. Today we believe that wholeheartedly, and we've added to it. We have the theory called social constructionism, which says that we're all the products of our environment. Full stop. And we have a Pavlovian reliance on neuroscience. We won't believe anything unless a brain scan confirms it, and when it does, we mentally salivate. Jung was very much empirically driven. I'm sure he would have appreciated neuroscience, but I'm equally sure he would have warned against such slavishness to these new ideas, methods, philosophies at the expense of more ancient and holistic forms of knowledge. He would say that very one-sidedness is the reason we find ourselves so cut off and split in two today. And we want to be fair here. Neuroscience has given us real insights. Behaviorism explains a lot of what we do. Social constructionism is valid, but they don't explain everything. And the parts they miss, those are the parts tearing us apart. Let's go into it some more. I'm going to show you the exact thing I learned in my first encounter with Jung, because it was a life-changing moment for me and I've never forgotten it. It made so much sense. I had been sent to university to study accounting, which I had no interest in, and I was delighted to discover that I could study psychology as an elective. After a few months of lectures on Pavlov's dogs and Skinner's rats and Freud's id, ego and superego, there came a lecture that completely turned things around for me and changed my life. And the lecturer drew a circle on the board and he said, this is the totality of the self, according to Jung. He drew an arc inside one end and colored it in. This is the shadow, he said, the part of ourselves that we deny. that we pretend does not exist. Then he drew a corresponding arc at the other end and left it uncolored. This is the persona, the acceptable face we show the world. It's generally the diametric opposite of the shadow. So here's where it gets interesting. He gave an example based on an actual case. A church-going person who presented themselves as highly moralistic, yet had a compulsion for stealing small things, restaurant spoons, hotel soaps, trinkets from people's houses. This person got caught and was taken to trial, and Jung testified in their defense. And Jung said it was perfectly natural for someone so moralistic on the surface to do these immoral acts impulsively in secret. Why? Because the energy they deny doesn't go away. It just goes underground. And like the tree, that energy still wants to be expressed. So it gets expressed in ways that appear acceptable to the person themselves. For example, the person on trial in this story had this narrative that my father worked for a cruel boss his whole life, and that's the reason for my childhood poverty. So I feel okay about taking the odd spoon or sugar sachet. So you can see they wouldn't admit that they steal because that would contradict the image they project to the world, their persona. Instead, they explained it away with a story. So the shadow survives by hiding in plain sight, justified by stories that make perfect sense to the person telling them. We can see then that the shadow, the denied part, has a life of its own, makes them do things compulsively. Ironically, the more the shadow pushes upwards, the louder the persona, the acceptable moralistic face becomes. So that person stealing the trinkets starts to steal more, and at the same time starts campaigning against, say, corporate corruption. The more one denies the thief inside, the more they are likely to crusade against the thieves out there. That's not theory, that's a pattern I've seen play out in my own life and hundreds of times in 10,000 coaching hours. The person who can't stop judging others for being selfish has an unacknowledged selfish streak that they can't face. The person crusading against greed has denied their own financial ambitions. The person who sees money as the root of all evil has buried their own desire to be rich. And this is what Jung meant by his famous line, "What is not made conscious manifests as fate." That's not some New Age manifestation idea. He meant it literally. The stuff that's not conscious drives you to make decisions you're not aware that you're making. And you think it's happening because of some outside force, which you call fate. So the moralistic person becomes a crusader against government corruption, say, unaware that they've got a corrupt part of themselves that needs healing. And they will say that it's God who chose them to fight corruption. It's God's will, it's fate. Fate had nothing to do with it. Their unexamined shadow made the decisions for them. And this is where Jung's ideas work brilliantly, explaining why people do things that contradict what they believe, why the preacher sins, why the activist is secretly envious, why you judge in others exactly what you can't face in yourself. One prevalent example in today's world is the liberal versus conservative conflict or debate. Liberals can't allow themselves any thought that might imply they are discriminating against others. So if a conservative has a valid point about, say, immigration, the liberal doesn't want to hear it. They've cast it into their denied parts, their shadow. Likewise, the conservative doesn't want to make concession to what they consider wokeness, because to do so might mean they're a little bit woke, or might mean that they have to face up to the possibility that there's some degree of prejudice in their ideas, maybe. So basically, nobody wants to be seen as bad. And the mistake we make is that instead of seeing it as a system that needs integration of its dark side or sides, we see it as a completely linear process. We become entirely linear in our thinking. Like Skinner with his rats, we believe everything has a cause, that people are just input-output machines. So if we can change the cause, we can change the output. In other words, get rid of the problem that is represented by the other side. In our case of liberals versus conservatives, we think that if we just present evidence, present the facts, it will change the other side's point of view. Facts in, logical conclusion out. But each side pre-selects the facts through their own lens, the lens that enables them to continue to deny their own shadow side. Or they take the same facts and interpret them through their lens, same thing. So people argue because they think they can just drive the dark side out of the other person by arguing with them, winning the argument. It doesn't work like that. We've got enough evidence. This has been going on long enough for you to see that. In fact, in the very attempt to drive out the bad, we've created a shadow. We've cast our unwanted bits onto the other side. So when we fight each other, we're really fighting with our own unwanted shadow. Another example might be masculinity. We see wild, rebellious male behavior and assume we know the cause. It's other men, toxic masculinity, patriarchal conditioning. So if we can remove the influence of other men, or at least shame it into submission, we can fix the problem. But by demonizing certain masculine traits, aggression, competitiveness, risk-taking, we haven't eliminated them. We've driven them underground, into the collective shadow, where they fester and come out in distorted ways, of which there are many. So we threw the baby of integration out with the bathwater of undesirable behavior. And the behaviorist approach says, bad behavior is conditioned, so recondition it. The neuroscience approach says, bad behavior is a brain pattern, so rewire it. Both treat human beings as input-output machines. Jung said something radically different. All behavior is normal when the totality is understood. Healing comes not from eliminating the bad part, but from recognizing it and integrating it. Here's the bit that really upsets people. Integration means expanding the shadow, allowing more of what's been denied. It sounds counterintuitive. Allow more of the bad? Well, yes, because denying it doesn't make it go away. It makes it unconscious. And what is not made conscious manifests as fate, or in our modern world, as culture wars. In practical terms, this is what that would look like. Liberals, for example, acknowledging that we all have some measure of discrimination, and sometimes that's actually healthy. Otherwise, how would you know danger from not danger, or beauty from not beauty? Oh, I forgot. We can't allow beauty because it's discriminatory. It's in our shadow. And conservatives would have to acknowledge that sometimes, though they insist they are the ones with the true facts, their ideas are really just short-sighted and self-serving. Oh, I forgot. We can't be wrong based on the facts because getting the facts wrong is in our shadow. Do you get the point? Look around, it's all over. Liberals and conservatives are mentioned. Christians and Muslims are doing the same. Each sees the other as the true aggressor. And guess what? Both are right about the other. Where they're not right is about themselves. Why? Because it's in their shadow. There's the rich and the poor, nationalists and immigrants. The world is full of shadows, and no amount of neuroscience or behavioural conditioning is going to fix that, because the problem isn't in the brain scan, it's in the unexamined whole. So what can we do about it? I like to return to ontological first principles. Ontology is the study of the nature of being. Ontological coaching is a path by which you can learn to observe your own experience directly, not through studies, but through your own awareness, and see things that scientists can't measure, things you can experience for yourself. So here's the ontological entry point into Jung's shadow work. Think of someone who really irritates you. And don't say Donald Trump, because we don't want to go into the gym and lift the heaviest of weights on day one. Just someone in your own life, maybe a work colleague. You got it? Now slow it down. What specifically about them triggers you? Is it that they're arrogant, selfish, dishonest, lazy? Name it. Now here's the ontological move, and it's uncomfortable. Where does that same quality live in you? Not the exact same behavior necessarily, but the same quality, the same impulse, the same tendency you've worked hard to suppress, deny, or disguise. I promise you it's there. However big or small, it doesn't matter. Remember, our person earlier was stealing hotel soaps and justifying it while moralizing out there in the world. If you're honest, really honest, not performatively honest, you'll find it. Always, because Jung was right, the psyche is whole. What you hate out there is what you've denied in here. This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about seeing the whole picture. And when you do, something shifts. Judgment doesn't disappear, but it loosens. You start to see the other person and yourself with more accuracy and less projection. Ease up a bit on them and on yourself. And what happens is this. The shadow side gets bigger, so does the persona. More is allowed in both. So you expand your repertoire, your range of possible responses. Eventually you get to a point where the picture looks like this, and you're living in that middle space where you can see your own prejudice, for example. So when you point it out in others, you do it with compassion and understanding, because you know you have it too. You see that you're both travelers on a journey working through things together. That doesn't require argument or facts. It requires insight, wisdom, seeing the bigger picture. Not performative, but real, because what you see can't be denied. And I'm sure you'll agree, if we all did a bit more of that, it would make for a better world. I'm Neil Bierbaum, Master Certified Coach with 20 plus years and 10,000 hours testing what actually works in the real world, not just in theory. I'm here today to remind you that just because an idea is old it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. Sometimes it might mean we weren't ready. Subscribe for more self-help for skeptics based on ontological first principles, and let me know in the comments, where do you see shadow projection playing out in your own life or in the culture? I read everything and I want to know what you're seeing so I can help, because your best self deserves better.